infamous serial killer who was ever there. But I just gotten through writing a story about teenagers catching serial killers called The Naturals, and I was like, wouldn't it be nice to have a little less murder this time? I wanted something, because there's a lot of murder in The Naturals. Lots of dead bodies. There's serial killers. There are 4 books. Do the multiplication there. There was lots of murder. So I was like, I want something that would be a good thing that could happen to you. So I thought of things, and then one day I just woke up and I was like, a billionaire dies and he leaves you all of his money and no one knows why. And I was like, yeah, that would do it. So it passed the gossip test, and I was like, that's a story that I want to write. And actually, there are all different kinds of theories about why we like fiction. And so I use all of those theories. I also used to specialize in the psychology of fandom. So what kind of things do fans do when they truly love stories? So things like fan fiction, talking to your friends about it, fan art. And I studied all of that and what makes fan-enabling properties. And then I actually kind of used all of that to make a huge list of predictions. I made this, like, I kid you not, it's like a 19-page workbook of all the things that I would predict that people would like in stories. And then I said, what would happen if I tried to do all of that in one story? And what happened was the Inheritance Games.
Oh, wow.
Do you teach classes, Jenna? And can we sign up for your classes?
She did a breakfast.
Allison asked me some scientific questions at breakfast. We talked about it. You never want to get me talking about science because I will not stop.
Yes, you do.
And
Absolutely.
you want to have a notebook and pen with you.
Only if you want a best-selling series, otherwise don't.
All right, and then for Adam, I read that your book ideas come from difficult questions or explorations about questions that torment you. Can you talk about that a little in relation to what inspired Max and the House of Spies?
Sure. This is not like a super fun topic, but here we go. It was the beginning of the pandemic. Some of you remember that quite well. Some of you were young enough that you don't remember it all that well. And what I mostly remember was that I didn't know what was true. People were saying things, and it was not clear what was true, and what was a deliberate lie, and what was just a mistake, right? You know, I remember reading an article in the New York Times saying, don't wear masks. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm not supposed to wear masks. And it was because they were trying to preserve masks for the healthcare workers, which makes sense, but we actually did need masks. And then I remember somebody was like, you should inject yourself with bleach. And then someone died because they did that, right? And so I felt like so bewildered. Bewildered literally means like you're in the wilderness, lost in the wilderness. And so I wanted to start reading about, I actually, the question that I asked myself was, what happens when a country, a nation, commits themselves to lies? And so I started reading about like the most famous and extreme example of that, Nazi Germany, where the leader Adolf Hitler said, you know, Germany was a country that had fallen apart. They had lost World War I. They were starving in the streets, and their army had been dismantled. And this guy showed up, and he said, I will make Germany the greatest country in the world. And all you have to do is hate all of the same people that I hate. And he told them a bunch of lies that they knew were lies. Germany's nickname was the land of thinkers and poets before Hitler arrived. They were highly educated, and they were a very integrated society, at least when it came to Jews. There were 100,000 Jews won medals of valor for World War I. It was integrated society. And he came up and he told these lies, and the country committed themselves to these lies all together, and we got Nazi Germany, and we got World War II, and we got the Holocaust. And so I wanted to understand, how could a country do that? And so I started reading as much as I could about it. I took a class on Nazi Germany, and in order to answer this question, and so Max in the House of Spies and the sequel, which is called Max in the Land of Lies, you know, it's a fun adventure story. There are two mythical creatures on Max's shoulders, which you didn't mention, but also it tries to wrestle with this question, how could a country commit themselves to lies?
All right, so now. All right, so y'all got lots of questions, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to go through as many as I can. So for Stuart, do you work for the CIA?
I can't answer that. I was so jealous of James because he got to work with this director, and then a couple of weeks ago, I got a phone call from the CIA. And that was immediately followed up by an email from the CIA saying, most people freak out when they get a phone call from the CIA, don't panic. And they wanted to talk to me, and I called them up, and they said, we understand that you're writing this book about spies, and I was like, that's not really good spy work, because I've been writing it for 12 years, but,
American
you
intelligence.
guys just figured this out, but they did call me in, so I now have finally been given access to the
Why did they call you in?
because they actually apparently like the series. It's kind of like James got there. I actually met spies who became spies because of the spy school series. So they're not very old yet. Just, you know,
14-year-old spies.
But no, they really wanted to. They wanted to give me knowledge and sort of shape stuff. So now I am actually working in the CIA, but I spent most of my time there. Every time I met someone, they'd say, I'm sorry for what I said about how you guys work, and every single one went, it's closer to that than you could ever imagine. So, so I don't work for the CIA, but now I can say I kind of work with the CIA.
It's all about beating me. That's the
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's what I had.
Yes. Yeah, and they were like, hey, we'd like to talk to James Ponte. I'm like, no, you don't. No.
All right, for James, how did you come up with your side-ish characters like Annie, Robert, and Clementine?
Okay, so, God, I've never been asked that, so I don't have a built-in start. You're just gonna have to tell the truth this time. So I wanted to go to prep school, and I couldn't get in with my grades. But, no, so, the City Spies are, it's 5 kids being raised by the secret agent who raises them as family spies, is the starting point. And so I wanted each of the 5 kids to be someone who I identified with. So I took the 5 biggest problems I had in middle school, and I gave each kid one of those problems. And that way, I would always be working on something I dealt with myself for them, and that way they wouldn't fall. But then the sideline characters are they're more born out of need. And the whole idea of City Spies is this man named Mother, because that's his code name, and his wife were spies. And they went on a mission to Paris. Something went terribly wrong. It looked like he was caught in a fire and was going to die. She panicked. She went back to London. She took their kids and she disappeared. And he made it. He survived. And he's searching the world for his children. Now, not to get too heavy, but we've been heavy in some things. I never met my dad. My dad, last year at at North Texas Steamboat Festival, that night I got an email from Italy saying, I think you're my uncle, and the next day I had 8 new siblings. But up until last year when I was here, everything about my father was a mystery. And for 50 years, he never once looked for me. You know, he didn't care, and that's fine, because I had a great life. But I was going to write the opposite. I was going to write the guy who was going to search the world for his children, no matter where it took him. Now, for that to work, I needed the wife not to be an evil creature. I needed to come up with circumstances. So the characters they mentioned, Annie, Clementine, and Robert, are his wife and his natural born children, because he's adopted these other children. And I wanted to write about how, as much fun as this stuff is, and it is a lot of fun, there is collateral damage. And for this family is the collateral damage. So I really tried to ask myself, what could make someone act in a way that seems bad, but maybe isn't bad? Or more likely, is good and bad mixed together? And then what would those children be like I was? And the odd thing about the thing is, because in the last year, since last year I was here, I've now met my sister, who's 2 months younger than me, but we lived the first 57 years without ever meeting each other. And I'm asking myself the question, what is a family? And that's been the central question of this book for 5 books now. What is a family? And so it's based on reality, and it's based on that question. And I was part of a found family in a way, and I wanted to write about that. I don't know if that answers the question.
So this is one that anybody can answer, but someone's asking, how do you save your ideas that you get at random times? So say you're driving down the road, and you get a great idea. How do you save it?
I do not have an efficient system for this. I like pretty journals. I own a lot of them, and whatever idea I get will end up in a random journal, and then cut to 5 years from now, and I'm like, what journal is that idea in? And I have no idea which one. So I do not recommend my system.
I keep, I feel like most of my best ideas happen like when I'm about to go do something else, and so like in my kitchen I have a magnetic pad that's like just sitting there, so I can always write something down. In the bathroom I always have one. Like everywhere in my, like I have the same kind of thing, and then when I have more time I can go and write them all down. And I keep them actually in my phone because that way I can search. Like if I keep them in the notes and it goes automatically into my computer, so I won't lose them. Otherwise I'm like, I used to write them on scraps of paper, and then I would find one in the bag and be like, oh, that's the idea that I thought I wanted to use and I forgot about. Now that book's already been handed in.
When you say magnetic pad, do you mean like the words that you have to rearrange?
Waterproof.
Oh, okay, because it would take forever to be like, oh, where's it from?
That would be efficient. So we're looking at magnitude-all.
Dry erase.
What do you do with that? Ruth?
Voice notes on my iPhone. And so what comes to me first, actually, is my dialogue. I hear people speaking, and so.
There are doctors who can help you with
that.
Jennifer's right here.
See you after this panel. And so I write the dialogue, and I have on my iPhone all these voice notes with random people in conversation.
I'll call my wife and say something like, when you see me next, say potato chip machine gun, Reese's peanut butter cup. Like, that should spur the idea, and she has no idea what I'm talking about. Usually when she says it, I've lost it.
I email them to myself, again on my phone, but this isn't the best thing, but I try to categorize the idea in a book that I'm working on. And the book will have a working title, so like the one I'm thinking about right now is called Papa Jake. He's a main character, that won't be the name of the book. And so I have 200 emails to myself called Papa Jake, and then the ideas are in there, and then so what I do is I take all of those emails, I type them into a document when I'm ready to start writing, and then I can start rearranging the ideas into what becomes my outline.
I was on a panel with him earlier today, and I saw him emailing Papa Jake. I'm like, dude, you're on a panel, and you're writing your dad?
I know. I was inspired by something Jerry Hernandez said,
Yeah.
and it's my Papa Jake file now. The same two people are clapping for that. You don't have to clap.
Mr. and Mrs. Gitwitz, it's
We're running close on time, so here's another one that hopefully we can do a quick thing. So I'm going to tweak this a little, but tell us your favorite benefit of being an author versus a regular job.
It's this festival.
Oh, what a
No,
sweetie.
I mean, I'm not gonna. I have met many of my best friends. There is not a bad person in the middle grade NYA community. I met many of my.
You know there's one.
There's one. But that's not a bad. It's not a bad track record, right?
There's not. I'm just like,
No. I didn't know when you like honestly when I was invited to listen to the first of these festivals, the first one, I was like, ugh, writer festival, that's not gonna be fun at all. And then I met so many people at that very first North Texas that have become my best friends in the world. And the group has grown and grown, and it is just the most wonderful. I didn't know that was gonna the writer community was gonna be part of being a writer, and it's just been an absolute miracle.
For me, I was one of those kids in school who could never pay attention. I was in the principal's office 2 to 3 times a week, and in middle school in particular. And so now I have a job where I have no boss. No one can tell me what to do. I can do the weirdest, craziest stuff, and as long as I can make you like it as much as I like it, I can do whatever I want. And that's just the best thing in the world for me.
Yeah.
For me, it would be, these secrets that I've dug up throughout history and I've written about. Now, I have unrestricted access to all sorts of secret archives, and people are inviting me in, saying, could you help us figure out what's going on here, or could we show you something? And I'm like, yes, you can.
Is Shakti here? Shakti, if you're here, stand up. So Shakti, for me, is the highlight. I was at a school visit. I'm gonna cry, I can't even cry. And they said it was during distance learning. So some kids were distance learning and some kids weren't. And Shakti and her parents had read my books together, and she was a distance learner because they didn't feel safe for her coming into school. And they called, they said, can we make an exception so she can come listen to James talk for 45 minutes? And the principal said no. And that morning she showed up, and the librarian said she was panicked because, oh, they're gonna have this thing. And her parents enrolled her in school, which was not what they wanted to do as parents. So they could spend 45 minutes with me, and I was certain she was gonna get COVID that day. And then they were gonna come and get me. And to realize that it's not about me or my book, it's about the power that books can do, that I get to be part of something, that someone could do that, and that later Shakti's mom could write and say it was the best day of her life, and that later I could write a book and make Shakti a brain surgeon at a hospital in London, and realize that this job that I thought was going to be very lonely, I have amazing friends, and I get to meet amazing people, and it is so enriching. Thank you, Shakti. I'm very glad you did not get
Oh my God, James, now I'm gonna cry.
She likes the money.
I came into writing because I was sort of desperate to survive. My first 3 books are based on my very challenging upbringing, very privileged and very hard. So on the outside, everything looks super fancy and nice. So everybody was like, well, why aren't you happy? But there was a lot of other stuff going on. And I came out of writing these 3 books about what I went through with the best friends in the world. And kids who would write to me and share their stuff with me. And I realized every time I put out a book that I got to fix myself, and that they were getting fixed. We were all sort of talking about our problems. And I grew up in a house where you just brushed everything under the rug, and you didn't have any problems. I grew up in Boston, we don't talk about our feelings. And then all of a sudden, every kid wanted to talk about their feelings, and I'm I want to talk about my feelings too. And then it just created this amazing effect. I had no idea that I didn't realize when I wrote the book that kids would read it and have their own response, and then that response would lift me up and fill my cup and make me want to do it more. And then I was okay, I want to write something really fun that's happy and exciting and an adventure, and the kind of book I would have wanted to read as a kid. And I thought okay, I'm not going to get these feeling stuff anymore. And actually, what's amazing is because it's the book that I wanted as a kid, and it's the series that I wanted. It's given me a new kind of confidence. And every time a reader comes up to me and says I didn't see that coming. It gives me something else I didn't expect at all. And it's kind of amazing, and it's I had no idea that being a writer was going to do all of this stuff. It's a special job.
So there's this concept in media psychology called parasocial relationships, which are relationships you form with people you don't actually know, one-sided relationships. You can form them with a celebrity or a fictional character, and you form them by consuming media about them. And what the psychology says is that those imaginary relationships can have real-world effects. They can make you feel less lonely. And that was very much my teenage experience. A lot of my friends happened to be fictional, but they got you through stuff. So knowing that I can create characters and seeing readers forming the attachments to those characters is my favorite part.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Alright, so thank you
Can
so
I throw
much.
one line in real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. So I had a very young age. My mom lied to me nonstop, so I decided I would never lie. I only remember specifically one lie in my life. I was on a blind date, and the whole point of a blind date is for a guy to go out with a girl who's out of their league. And I was out with a girl who was so out of my league, and so smart, and so pretty, and so interesting, and so funny. And she asked me on the date, she said, do you like to read? Because I love to read, and I hated reading. I was in college, I read one book by the time I got to college. And I thought, I don't think she wants to hear that, so I'm gonna double down and I'm gonna say, I don't like to read, I love to read, it's all I like to do. I thought, there's not gonna be a book report on the date, no one's gonna ask us about your listings, I can get away with this. And it would've been fine, except we've been married for 35 years, and I've never met, and I lied on our first date. And she would come over to hang out at my apartment, and she said, I thought we'd stay and read. We lived in Los Angeles, and the weather was amazing. I'm like, yeah, let's read. To keep from getting caught in the lie, I started to read, which made me a writer. And so, one lie, but it got me here, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for all of our authors for being here today. So y'all remember, the signing event is just in a little